Hi, James and Mitchell here, and in this video I'll be looking at our tarot cards for the week starting February the 8th, 2016. So stay tuned. And here we are with the cards on the table, and the deck assisting us for this week's reading is the Fairy Tarot cards. They are by Doreen Virtue, Radleigh Valentine, and Howard David Johnson. So as I do with these weekly general readings, I take the deck in hand and I always ask, what do we need to know about the week ahead in terms of possible potentials for the week, anything that we might need to know to make it an awesome week. So as I'm shuffling the cards, I'm basically looking for cards to stick out. And the first card always represents the beginning of the week. And shuffling again. The next card is going to serve as the middle of the week. And shuffling once more. Third card is going to be rounding out the week. So these are our cards. And like I do with these general readings, I always turn the deck over and I start with the card on the bottom. The card on the bottom serves as the foundation or the basis for the week. So this is the Lovers, and the Lovers is a Major Arcana card. So a Major Arcana card carries more weight in a reading when it appears, and this would suggest that the foundation or the underlying energies for the week are going to be something that's geared towards our spiritual growth and development, because that's one of the things I look to for the Major Arcana cards. And the Lovers card in particular represents being at a crossroads. So we may experience being at a crossroads this week, and it's going to require us to make a major life choice, because the Lovers traditionally is known as the choice. And so there could be a choice that we need to make. It could revolve around relationships, because the Lovers card is a relationship-oriented card. It can also revolve around issues dealing with communication in those relationships, because this card for me is the sign of Gemini, and Gemini for me represents communication. So it could represent, in our relationships, we may have to choose how we come across in terms of the things that we say to people and our communication style. But I tend to look at this as when we are needing to make a choice of some kind, the Lovers card is asking us to make the choice from an emotional place or a heart-centered place. So it could be like, instead of being rational, analytical, and logical with your decision making, basically come down to asking yourself, how does that choice make you feel? So what you could do is, if you have, let's say, two options, two choices, you could take a moment, get still, and see how making the choice, you can envision making the choice, you've made the decision, and then as a result of making that decision, how do you feel as a result of making that decision? And then let that kind of scenario play itself out. That might be a way that kind of helps you make that choice. Now, in terms of angels, Archangel Raphael is the angel that's associated with this card. So it could mean too, in terms of relationships, you may want to call on Archangel Raphael to assist you in helping to heal a difficulty in a relationship, because this, like I said, represents Raphael and relationships, but something of an emotional nature, something that may need some healing. So that would be the energy of the Lovers card. So that's the foundation for the week. Moving to the first card, which represents the beginning of the week, we have the High Priestess. Okay, so now this is very interesting. So now the High Priestess is another Major Arcana card. So at the beginning of the week, we may have another important issue or event that is calling our attention. It's very interesting that the High Priestess would follow the Lovers card, because the High Priestess can also represent needing to make a choice. And here's the thing. If you remember, I said with the Lover's card about being still and imagining or visualizing making the choice. The High Priestess, when it comes to making choices and decisions, can represent a wait-and-see approach. It could suggest that you do not have all the information. She's holding a book which represents information and knowledge. So it could represent that you do not have all the information that you need to make, that would help you make the decision, I should say, at this time. And so it's a matter of waiting. So if you're being faced with making a decision at the beginning of the week, you're being asked to take a pause. Don't decide right away. One of the things I usually encourage people when they come to see me for a reading or for coaching and they're faced with a decision, going back to the Lover's card, I usually ask them, do you need to make the decision right away? If it's something that is not urgent or time sensitive, then this card is asking you to give a pause. So you could say, I'd like to sleep on it, or can I get back to you in a day? You know, give yourself some time to reflect on it, because the High Priestess represents needing to take the time to reflect. And she's also an intuition card. So you're being called with the High Priestess is asking yourself, when I said about being heart-centered and going with your feelings with the Lover's card, that's all going with your intuition. Your intuition is based on your emotional nature, on your feeling nature. So when you're faced with something, the first thing you should ask yourself is, how do I feel about that? Because that might be an intuitive impulse that's going to help you make the decision. But again, it also represents the need to wait for further information or knowledge. Now, if we're dealing with a relationship issue with the Lover's card like I saw before, then the High Priestess would suggest it's very important that you learn balance, because number 2 here is balance, that you learn balance in a relationship. And it's also too that you do not lose a sense of your own identity in a relationship, because she represents being independent. So you're being asked one or two things with this in order to seek balance. If you're the type of person who is fiercely independent, and you may have run the story in the past, because she's holding the book, so that could represent our story, and becoming more open, becoming an open book more or less, or you know, you're opening a new chapter of your life, so this is about learning a new way of being. She's asking you to consider, if you've been fiercely independent in the past and you've been feeling like, well, I just don't need anybody, that kind of thing. I'm hearing like the idea of like women saying they don't need a man, that kind of energy. If you're carrying that kind of energy, this card is asking you is about how can you soften that? How can you kind of balance that out? Because the idea with a relationship, it's about balance. And so it's about give and take. It's about learning to depend to some extent on another person, but without losing your independence. So it's walking a fine line. It's an interesting dichotomy, but that's what the High Priestess represents. So now, if you're also the type who's been totally dependent on other people, then the lesson here with the High Priestess is about how can you start creating more independence in your life? How can you start doing things on your own? So I'm seeing that as the energy with the High Priestess at the beginning of the week. In the middle of the week, we have the Ace of Winter. Okay, so now this is a nice follow-up to the High Priestess. The Ace of Winter is a card that represents usually a triumph, a victory, a success of some kind. It represents like getting clarity. So if you've been seeking an answer, then this card is a nice follow-up because it says you will get that answer. It represents getting an answer or solution to a problem that we've been experiencing. It can also represent beginning something new. So it could be like as a result of gaining that insight, gaining that guidance, gaining that knowledge, that bright idea, that aha moment, that it kind of sets the stage for you moving into a new direction. Because aces always represent something new with the potential for growth in the future. So this is a nice card to follow up. So now one of the things that could be happening with the Lover's card, and I said about making a choice or a decision, the choice may involve looking for work, because sometimes the Ace of Winter for me represents a job or career change. So it could be, you know, if you're embarking on that endeavor, it could be like with the Lover's card, like who would you need to partner with? What kind of relationships would you need to have in order to move that new venture forward? It could also be, how would the job or career change impact your existing relationships? If you're partnered, how would that affect your relationship? And if you're not partnered, well then what other relationships do you have in your circle that could be impacted by this change? Now, the Ace of Winter sometimes can suggest that if you're embarking on something new, it might be a little bit of a bumpy start. Don't let that deter you. We all have learning opportunities. Going back to the High Priestess, everything is a learning opportunity, and you might not have all the knowledge when you first start out, and the little bumps or the little challenges are going to actually provide you those opportunities for growth, and they come from having those learning experiences. So the Ace of Winter in the middle of the week is a very positive sign. It represents, gaining some insight, gaining an answer, a solution to a problem. It represents gaining some triumph, success, or victory. Very positive card. Now, moving to the end of the week, we have the Five of Autumn. And so now this is an interesting kind of change or shift here. The Five of Autumn can represent sometimes breaking away from a crowd, breaking away from a group of people. And with it is because one or two things. Either we feel like we're no longer a part of that group, or that we need to find a new group to move into. I'm seeing an image from another deck. It's the same card, and that one has a person standing on the outside of a group. So sometimes it could be about creating the experience of being on the outside looking in, or feeling like we're an outsider, that we don't fit, we don't belong. And if that's the case, then it's about you moving on to a group in which you would feel that sense of belonging. Sometimes the Five of Autumn can be about seeking help or assistance. And so at the end of the week, we may have, dovetailing off of the Ace of Winter, this job or career change or this new venture could be as a result of not being employed, or having been unemployed for some time, and it's a way out of that. It could be also too, like, if you're going to embark on this, who could assist you? Because like I said, the Five of Autumn is about needs being met and assistance, getting help and assistance. So who could assist you with that? Because this card represents help or assistance. Now, it could be you helping someone else or somebody helping you, but I'm seeing that energy going with that. So the Five of Autumn just represents too this idea of, if it is somebody, let's say the idea here is about somebody venturing into self-employment, then you might want to consider that option very carefully, because sometimes the Five of Autumn in terms of self-employment can represent like it being a venture that could be somewhat cyclical. And when I say cyclical, meaning like money comes in at certain times and then other times it doesn't. And so you might want to gain more information about this new venture before actually taking any action and putting any resources into it. You might want to see, is it going to be something that people are going to need, that people are going to value? And if so, how often are they going to need it? Is it something that's going to be periodic? Is it something that's going to be meeting a constant need? That kind of energy. So be very mindful of, if it is a self-employment venture, that you look into it carefully, because the Five of Autumn can sometimes represent this need for something to be more constant, because this card could represent something being cyclical. So I'm seeing that as the energy. Now, in terms of relationships, it could also be that you break away from people because your needs are not being met. People are not treating you in the way that you deserve to be treated, because this card is about getting the treatment that we deserve. So if that is the case, then this card is asking you, part of the choice or the decision you might need to make would be moving away from the people who don't appreciate you, who don't value you, who kind of maybe ignore you, or kind of give you the cold shoulder. You know, I'm seeing energy like that, like I'm being frozen out. Isn't that funny that it follows Ace of Winter? So I'm being like frozen out. So if you're experiencing this idea of being frozen out, being given the cold shoulder, you know, this kind of rejection kind of energy, ask yourself, do I want to continue being in that space? And if so, why? What do you get out of continually being in that energetic space of being ignored and rejected? So you have to ask that. That's an important question that's going to serve you in your growth. Ask that question. And then also, too, do I deserve that? If you feel like you don't deserve it anymore, then maybe the choice here is for you to break away and to form some sense of independence. So I'm seeing that as the energy for the week with the cards. The next thing we can do is we can look to see, even though we have two major arcana cards here, we could look to see what the overall lesson for the week is. And in reviewing the cards, we have the High Priestess, which is a major arcana card, and that is 2. We have the Ace of Winter, aces are 1. And then we have the 5 of Autumn, so 5. That gives us a total of 8. And so the 8th card in the major arcana is Justice. And so while I'm looking for the card, Justice is an interesting card to have as the overall lesson for the week, because it actually reinforces the energies of the Lovers and the High Priestess, because it represents being faced with needing to make a decision, and the card was way down in the deck, and so there it is, there's Justice. And so when Justice appears, again, it reinforces the idea of needing to make a choice or a decision, like I said. And here's the thing about it. Now, it's a very interesting dichotomy, because I said here with the Lover's card, it's about being in your heart space and making a heart-centered choice or decision. Justice represents being willing to take a step back and to look at all the possible angles and sides of the situation that's being examined. It can also represent, you know, needing to weigh the pros and the cons. So it's about looking at things more from a rational, logical place, which is kind of just the opposite of the Lover's card. So it could be saying too that we kind of maybe need to kind of join in the energies this week. So kind of like in some point being in your heart space, but also be willing to keep an open mind. So I'm going to put it like that. But Justice is about making a choice that is in the best and highest good for everyone involved. And so if it is a choice or decision that needs to be made involving other people, just remember that you factor into that decision-making process too. So I'm seeing that it's about doing the right thing for everyone involved. It could represent too needing to be as impartial, as neutral, as fair as you possibly can be in the moment. You have to kind of maybe imagine yourself in the other person's position. I'm hearing a song in my head by Kylie Minogue, and it's called Put Yourself in My Place. That's the name of the song. So what it is like, it's asking you to kind of consider what the other person might be thinking or feeling, you know, and if you were that person, if you were on that side of the line, you know, how would you look at the situation from that standpoint? So that's the energy of Justice for me. I see it as a choice or decision needing to be made. It needs to be something that is fair, right, and just for everyone involved, and that includes you. It could also be with the High Priestess. I'm looking at the pair now. It could be that there is a legal matter needing to be looked at or examined, because Justice can represent the legal system and things involving the law, and then the High Priestess can sometimes represent the law itself or a lawyer, because in traditional imagery she's seen holding the Torah, which is the book of Jewish law. So I sometimes read that as the law. So again, it represents, if that is the case, both Justice and the High Priestess are saying if there is a decision that needs to be made, it could be one or two things. Either number one, you need to wait because you don't have all the information. And then Justice would reinforce that by saying you need to make a well-informed choice or decision, which means that you need to have all the evidence to make the best and right decision. The other thing could be that you can't make a decision because it's out of your hands, especially if it's in the legal system. So I'm seeing that kind of energy. So again, if it is that kind of thing, it could be number one, you need to have more information to make the best possible choice, or number two, that there's some element of it that's out of your hands, out of your control, because we have 3 major arcana cards here now. And that's usually the more major arcana cards there are on the table, usually represents that the circle of energy, so to speak, is widening, which means that there's more people involved, and as a result of having more people involved, you do not have as much control over the situation as you might like. So I'm seeing that. So summing up, at the beginning of the week, we have the High Priestess, and that could be if you're needing to make a choice. This card is saying take a pause. You need to have more information than what you currently have. And so you're just waiting for that information. It could be also too that something that you've lost in terms of paperwork or documentation or information, that you will find that, because sometimes this card can represent information being lost but also being found. It could also suggest too that you honor your intuition at the beginning of the week, especially with a choice. It could be the first thing you need to ask yourself is, how does that make me feel? Because that might be an intuitive message that your body is sending you, and you need to pay attention to that. So I'm seeing that kind of energy. It could also be that how can you, either one or two ways in your relationships this week, how can you either learn to depend on other people just a little bit more, or how can you begin the process of becoming more independent? So that's the beginning of the week. Ace of Winter. If you've lost information, if you're seeking information and guidance going with the High Priestess, then this card says middle of the week, you find the answer or solution to that problem you've been experiencing. This card represents a possibility and the potential for a triumph, victory, or success. Very good card to have. It can also represent that as a result of some information, an aha moment, some insight, it might set you on a new path, and that could involve a job or career change. So that's Ace of Winter. Moving to the end of the week, we have the Five of Autumn. If that job or career change involves self-employment, be mindful of looking at how consistent that self-employment venture could be, because this card requires help and assistance with that. So looking at that, if we're talking about relationships at the end of the week, you may be faced with the choice or decision to break away from a person or a group of people who have kind of either given you the cold shoulder, have frozen you out, are not treating you in the way that you deserve to be treated, and it is time to move on. So this has been your week in tarot. I am James Himm Mitchell, and I want to thank you for watching this video and creating space and time for me to be a part of your world. If you have recently subscribed, because I have a number of new subscribers in the space of last week's video and this week's video, I want to say welcome. I am so happy that you are here. To all my subscribers, I want to say thank you for subscribing to my channel, because it sends the message to me that you have allowed me space into your world, that you have created space for me to be in your world, and I don't take that lightly, and I'm very grateful, I'm very honored, I'm very blessed that you would do that. So thank you for making me a part of your world. I greatly appreciate it. So again, this is James Himm Mitchell. I'm signing off, and I'm wishing you a tarot-tastic week. And until our next video, take care.